I realized I didn't finish the story that I told yesterday. I was going to tell yesterday about the Shevet Musar. Now, the Shevet Musar one time was approached by a man, and we were discussing about why, how to recognize the difference between various spiritual beings that might confront themselves to people. Now, the Shevet Musar, who, like we said yesterday, was his yard site, and he lived in the late 1600s, early 1700s in Izmir, Turkey. It's interesting that he was there in Izmir. I mentioned in my last video about Shabtai Tzvi Machshamo, who was from Izmir, and around the same time, although the Shevet Musar was growing up really in the aftermath of that whole debacle. And yet, he did not abandon Kabbalah. He was a great Kabbalist because he recognized the difference between true Kabbalah and the fake anti-Kabbalah, which used a lot of Kabbalistic imagery of the Sabbatean movement. But that's beside the point. And really, this story really represents that in a certain way as well. So there was a fellow who came to the Shevet Musar, and like I said, the story he brought down in his Sefer Minchas Eliyahu, and like I said, he wrote over 40 Svarim, the Shevet Musar. Rav Eliyahu Cohen was his name, and his family name was also called Itamari, because they said that they could trace their lineage back through Ithamar, which was from the family of Aaron the Kohen, of the high priest Aaron, Ithamar. So Rav Eliyahu Cohen, he said that there came to him, and like I said, he was the chief rabbi in Izmir, Turkey, which was a big Jewish community. So the Shevet Musar, the Rav Eliyahu Cohen, he said a fellow came to him and he said, Rabbi, Chacham, Rabbeinu, I've been having visions of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and of Gabriel, the archangel Gabriel, or Gabriel, and they always tell me good things. Nothing he understood that there could be something fishy going on here. He understood that right away. And he said, they always tell me good things, but I know myself that I'm not worthy for these type of visions. Now that shows the humility of this man, which is very important, and also the cognizance that he had, and the necessity that he had to develop a sense of havchona, a sense of understanding, and being able to tell the difference between these things, and the need to go and ask a Rav this question. The significance of this. And so these days, if someone would come to a rabbi like this, they would say, you should go see a psychologist. And I'm not discounting psychology as a genuine science. I'm not a Scientologist. I definitely believe I majored in psychology in college. That was my major. I got my bachelor's degree in, and I work in a psychiatric facility. But also, even in the facility where I work, I facilitate spirituality groups, and so they understand that people have to be approached holistically, and that spirituality is a major part of it. So the concept that we have here, though, is so this man asked the Minchas Cohen, the Minchas Eliyahu, the Shevet Musar, what should I do with this experience I have? So Shevet Musar answered him. He said very wisely, He said, when you're approached by these three individuals, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, ask them, are you the Avot HaOlam? Are you the Avos HaOlam? Are you the patriarchs of the world? Are you the patriarchs from the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Are you just three guys? You're not lying to me. Your names are indeed Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you're just trying to fool me by presenting yourself like this. And the same thing when you're confronted with Gabriel, ask him, are you the Archangel Gabriel? Are you just some guy named Gabriel, like, Gabe Kaplan, I don't know, from Welcome Back, Kotter, I don't know, So the story goes was that once he asked this Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they didn't bother him anymore. And then Gabriel was like, why did you tell the rabbi our secret? Why did you reveal this secret? This was supposed to be our secret. And he never said yes or no to his identity. And so after that, the Shevet Musar, he went back to Shevet Musar. The Shevet Musar gave him a kameya, an amulet, and this Gabriel character didn't bother him anymore. This teaches a few different things. One is that, yes, spiritual worlds exist, other dimensions exist, according to the story. Again, you might discount the story as being fictional or being mythological, and I can understand that, or being just a psychological, purely scientific psychological experience, and with nothing spiritual behind it. But in any event, it teaches some very valuable lessons. Let's say, first of all, assuming that spiritual worlds do exist beyond this world that we see. Other dimensions exist, and that human beings somehow have ways of communicating with these other dimensions, of interacting with them. And these other dimensions have ways of interacting with us. That being said, not everything should be taken at face value. Now, we were talking about yesterday was that how did they know that Rav Yehuda Hanassi was the one coming making kiddush for them? How did they know it wasn't a demon coming in the form of Rav Yehuda Hanassi? And the answer is that Kochos Atuma, forces of impurity, demons and so forth, cannot come, according to the tradition, cannot come in the form of holy people, of tzaddikim, of saints. So therefore, since they were aware of what Rav Yehuda Hanassi looked like, what Rabbeinu HaKadosh, what Rebbe looked like, they knew it was really him. However, none of us know what Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob looked like. I don't think too many people know. There might be some people who know what the Archangel Gabriel looks like, but the vast majority of us do not, and I do not. And other things like this. So therefore, these demons could come and be telling the truth, be saying, we're Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they have their societies. The Zohar speaks of Shade and Yehudoyin, of Jewish demons, and we can assume that demons have their whole cultures and religions and all the same things we have in their worlds. They're not, the Jewish idea of the demons, of Shadim, is really much, the word demon is probably not the proper word. They're much more similar, excuse me, to the Arabic cultural idea of the jinn, where we get the word genie from. They're much more similar to that than they are to what the Western Christian world has understood of demons. But they are something that God created, and the thing is that among these demons are evil demons. There are good demons and bad demons, and most demons just don't care about people. They just see us like we see cattle, basically. But the thing is that they try to take, some of them do indeed try to take advantage of people, and so therefore, and they will often do so in a way that they're not technically lying. In this case, they're presenting themselves by their actual names, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when in fact they're just three guys named Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And there's really nothing special about them, but because they're bandits, because they're gangsters, they're trying to take advantage of this person, but the person was wise enough not to let himself be taken advantage of. And so therefore he went to Rav, and the Rav was wise enough to have a proper answer with the proper level of discernment to understand the answers to these questions. And quite often people are not aware. So I'll talk about some things I heard the Rabbi Bar Tzadok spoke about. He said, go to Barnes & Noble, you'll see tons of what they call channeled literature. And this channeled literature, it's not necessarily figments of people's imagination, but rather it's also most likely not channeled from whoever it's being claimed to be channeled from. Just because you have a vision and someone claims to be an angel or a saint doesn't mean they're an angel or a saint. And if you don't have the proper tools of discernment, you can be fooled by these type of beings, because you're like, wow, this is something supernatural and it's presenting itself as holy, so it must be so. Why would he be lying? Well, why would it be lying? Well, because there's something they could get out of it. These are, beings that live off of our energy in a certain sense, just like, we can live off of cow's milk, basically. That's what Rabbi Bar Tzadok explains it. And in reality, these are things we have to deal with and be aware of in the world. And so therefore, if someone comes in the form of someone who we know how they look like, and they were a saintly person, you can assume that it's really them. But if it's someone we don't know what. Even the Baal Shem Tov, there's a picture that they say is the Baal Shem Tov, that it's been established that it's not the Baal Shem Tov, and it actually was not even a righteous person in that picture, and many people who I know won't even use that picture because of that reason. And yet, maybe someone thinks, I had a vision of the Baal Shem Tov. Well, how do you know it was really him? As opposed to someone like, the Samarav or the Baba Sali, that we know what they look like. Then if you do have a vision of these people, you can assume that it is really them. And even people who are alive, even tzaddikim who are alive, do, have the wherewithal to communicate to people even in dreams and so forth. So, I myself, I've had dreams of certain tzaddikim, and they told me things that were quite important, and I take it quite seriously because I know what that tzaddik looks like. I've met him many times. One in particular who I could think of was a Sklener Rebbe Shlita. He should have a long life, and he told me something, and I take it very seriously, because I really believe that was his neshama communicating with me for whatever reason. I'm not sure. Again, I don't feel like I'm worthy to something like that, even though I could just go to Borough Park and talk to him in person. But I definitely believe that something like that is authentic and worthwhile. Maybe I should go talk to him about it. I never did. But because I know what he looks like, I've met him many times, I'm able to have that discernment, as opposed to if someone would come to me and claim to be the Rebbe Melech. I have no way of knowing, even though there are descriptions of what he looked like. But still, despite that, I can't take that at face value. It's unwise to do so, actually. Or whatever, someone claims to be the Kedushas Levi, I can't take that at face value because I don't know what they look like. And so, especially, it's interesting, Rabbi Bar Tzadok noted a few other things. He said that people who are engaged in addictions are going to be more likely to be susceptible to be attacked by these demonic forces. And so that's in addition to the fact it's illegal and so forth, a very important reason to stay away from drugs and all these things. Because again, it would seem that spiritual beings have the ability to communicate to us through the chemicals in our brain, meaning that the chemical posture and composure of our brain is not it's 100% true that psychology is a real thing and that our brain is chemicals and cells and all that stuff, but somehow our brain has a way of communicating with things in otherworldly things. I remember my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Moshe Lazarus, he explained, he said, did anybody ever have deja vu? And everyone raised their hand, and he said, that is like, if now we have the digital, it doesn't have, I don't know if it happens to me, I don't really have TV now, I just have internet. But when I was a kid, we had the analog antenna TV, and sometimes you'd have like a scene from another TV show passing through while you were watching the other show, something like that. Sometimes you listen to the radio, same thing. You could hear two different, if you don't hear your tuner at the right frequency, you can pick up all kinds of weird things. And so we have a tuner, and we don't know how to fine tune it, meaning we are no longer privy to the gifts of prophecy, but that has gone away since biblical times, since Malachi was the last prophet. But there are lower levels of inspiration that we can have experience with even today, but most people just have static or just have some other. They don't know how to fine tune their tuner, to receive these gifts of prophecy. And really, the gates of prophecy are basically closed. So basically, the way I've heard it described is the best you can do is, you can get to the gate, but the gate is closed. But you could still hear what the angels maybe are saying on their way in and out. But do you have enough discernment? If you're not a Talmid Chacham, you're not going to have the discernment to understand. That's one of the gifts that we have when we learn Gemara and we learn how to think with discernment. We're able to discern what's authentic and what's not. In any event, what I wanted to bring out here is a little bit more than this, that within the realm of psychology, Carl Jung, Rabbi Barziluk brings up, taught that there's such a thing as a collective subconscious, because he interviewed people from different cultures, different languages, different religions, who all experience very similar things in their mental illness. And so, how do we explain that? First of all, it could be the skeptical approach that his findings are not true, they're not provable under the scientific method, although he has brought there have been similar things that have been repeated, but it's hard to really demonstrate something like this really under the scientific method. So it's possible either things are biased or untrue, coincidental. Those are the skeptical approach, which is valid. More than that, you could say it's an evolutionary trait that people have this inherently. Now, in general, you would say that there's something Lamarckian about that approach to evolution. That's basically like saying, to simplify, Lamarck would be to say, like, if a parent's arm was cut off, God forbid, the baby would be born with an arm missing, which of course is nonsense. But even from a Darwinian point of view, that to say that there's survival of the fittest based on the fact that someone has a fight or flight conscience, fears and things that are inherent, and that gave people advantage to survive. So there could be a Darwinian approach to that. But then beyond that, there could also be a spiritual fact that indeed the people are indeed communicating with another dimension, with a spiritual dimension, and that's what's really going on. Any of this is possible. So we really don't know. I don't want to take something like what I describe, even from a Kabbalistic book, as necessarily meaning to be taken literally. It's not necessarily so. It could just be a very profound lesson without being literally so, but it could also just as well be literal, and there's enough reason to be careful and to be on either way. Even if you want to say it's purely chemical, if you're learning something good from within your own brain, that's good. If you're learning something negative, it's bad. If you're feeling that you're being communicated from something, you should question it, no matter what. Certainly, there should be a skeptical approach to it, because you don't know if it's really so. There's a lot of things to talk about. In any event, I want to thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. I hope this was interesting, and look forward to seeing more. Thank you. God bless.